go. What's up, dudes? I'm Novak, and I do songs on the OP-1 field with no post-processing. I guess that's kind of a weird thing. I've had the OP-1 field for the last 8 months. I got it for beat making and loop-based music and stuff to try to get better at that. And when it got really hard for me, I would revert back to songwriting and recording my guitar into it. I know that's super weird because it wasn't built for that, and there are 0 editing capabilities, which is a video for another time. There's not much there. I'll do a video on it, but before I go to do that video, I thought it would be important to get my thoughts together, kind of blow the lid off of what I do and bring you guys inside. For me, recording on the OP-1's about 2 things. It's about taste and tactics. Super important. Taste, obviously, I can't do anything for you there, but tactics transcends the OP-1 field. These are just recording ideas that I think everybody either knows or intuitively knows, subconsciously. Like they're, you know, it's when you have a microphone in front of you, how close are you gonna get to it? How far are you gonna be from it? It matters. All these little things matter. These are really important questions to ask and really important concerns to have when you're recording, because everything counts, especially in a machine like this where it's literally a game of limitations. They don't really give you much to work with. But I love that. That's the thing that attracts me to writing and recording music in song form with this thing. I can feel that I'm not supposed to be doing it because it's really, really hard. It's kind of dumb that I do this, but I've come up with some really interesting results as a result of. So yeah, what I would like to do is show you guys at least the things that I think about when I'm going through the process, and hopefully you'll better understand how I do this stuff, and maybe it'll shine some light on these things for you to be able to adopt some of these ideas in your own work, regardless of whether you're doing it on the OP-1 or whatever other instrument. I really want to talk about this microphone business. Teenage engineering does not talk about this thing. In fact, nobody talks about this thing. I actually went onto the website to see their manual, and there's the hardware section in the beginning of the website. There's no mention of the microphone. I fell in love with this microphone. I even went so far to make a pop filter for it. I would record more intimate vocals, but then I'd have to turn my head or like out here, but still some of the plosives, because of how sensitive this microphone is, I would still have to like be careful. It made a lot of sense to have it, and then I made it, and it worked, which I'm like, I can't believe. This idea of getting closer and further from the mic is a huge aspect of recording stuff onto the OP-1 field. Because of the limitations, every choice you make really, really counts. And you have to get these things right as early as possible in the process, because it's just gonna compound as you go. As you know, you only have 4 tracks. You have to choose wisely. As far as overdubbing, that's a really scary thing without an undo button, but there are things that I do to counteract that, which I'll get into later in the video. So these are just ideas that I use to get the best recordings I possibly can as early as I can in the process, so that I don't run into trouble at the end when I have no options for editing or mixing. Choices that are really important, for example, which effects are you gonna use? The first thing I do, since I'm using the microphone for the guitar, for my vocals, when I lay a bass down with a live bass, I actually mic the Ampeg right here. It's really important to get the signal right. It's not like it is in a DAW for me. I don't go for the optimal value, the optimal volume where you're just under the red. I actually throw that idea out the window, and I get the optimal volume in proportion to the other sounds in the music. So if I'm starting with the guitar, I have a click, obviously, and I start with the optimal volume just under the red. But after that, that shit goes out the window, dude. At that point, I'm trying to measure everything based on everything else I have recorded in there. So the next thing I do, if I do a bass, I'm doing the bass to the volume of what I like to hear in contrast with the guitar. Once the bass goes in, maybe I'm doing a synth part. That synth part's gotta stay perfect inside of that mix already. I'm mixing as I go. This is the trick, I think, of what I do, because after that, you can't. You have your mixer for volume tracks, and you can split each track left and right. Those are your choices. So if you're overdubbing, you're fucked. if you don't actually take the time to set everything in place volume-wise as you record. It's not an easy process. It's actually quite punishing. But the more I do it, the better I get, the faster I get, the more intuitive it becomes, because what I'm doing is I'm practicing something I identify as the third dimension. The third dimension is you sit on the floor, you put the OP-1 down, you hit record, you record your guitar into the OP-1. What that does is it gets your guitar, but what it also does is it gets all this shit bouncing off your walls and ceilings and picture frames and all that stuff. So you're getting the room. If that's what you want, that's cool, that's your taste. But in terms of tactics, if you don't want that, you have to make some changes. I'm always moving it around and seeing what tone I want. How close do I want it? Do I want to hear the fingers scratching on the strings as I change chords? And do I want to hear my fingers physically plucking the strings? Or do I want to just hear the notes, is what I mean. These are all things to take into consideration. This is third dimensional thinking when it comes to recording. Everything has an effect on the vibe and the emotion of the fucking jam, dude. And it's all about the fucking jam, dude. The vocoder. The vocoder is the most important thing when dealing with the microphone. You can record straight onto the tape without the vocoder, just like straight through the microphone, but then you lose that effect slot, and you only get one effect slot per instrument that you can put on the vocoder, and one master effect. You only get two. You gotta use two. I always pick the vocoder, I always use it. I twist the mix of the vocoder until I see the red dot so that I'm getting full microphone volume, and you don't get any vocoder volume unless you press a key. You're basically getting an input for your microphone that goes through the effects chain. Took me a little while to realize that, but once I did, it was like vocoder is super, super important. Another quick note, at the end of the project, you still have one huge asset, one huge tool before that song leaves your OP-1 field, and that's the mix down to the record. You can mix your whole thing down onto one of those sides of the record. The beauty of it is that you can perform it as it prints. What I realized was there's a whole nother dimension to this thing. After everything's done, mess with the volumes in the mixer. You can mess with the EQ. You can mute tracks, you can turn them down, you can do all kinds of things. Performing the song as it prints onto the record is such a huge asset. Gain staging is another really important thing, and that's kind of what I talked about in terms of the third dimension. Getting your volumes right at the very beginning as early as possible and throughout the process is clutch. It was designed with these limitations to make you really think about what you want to put in there. The flip side of that is also, it's so like impossible to make shit on this thing that what it's really taught me is to not be so precious about what I'm doing and just to slap things together with the intuition of getting volumes right and making things sound like, if I'm gonna put this thing in there, this random synth arpeggio or this random drum sequence or whatever it is, does it sound good? It's the most important thing. It's gotta sound good. I still want it to sound good. I still want to listen to it after I'm done with it. Even if it's something that's like, fuck it, that's random, I'm just gonna throw that in there and see what happens, which a lot of the times is how this stuff comes together for me. For me, writing has always been a precious thing. It's gotta feel this way, illustrate this idea, or convey this emotion. With the OP-1 field, you don't have the luxury of telling it what to do. It kinda tells you what to do. I just let it have me, and it fucking takes me away, dude. Out of here. A few features that I'd like to discuss. A few features that I wanna discuss. Just a few. Things that I didn't realize were there until later on and would have helped me so much if I knew about them earlier. One is the line-in microphone stereo mono setting. When you plug a synthesizer into the OP-1 field, all I can do is hear the volume from the synthesizer in my left ear. So then I would like mic the synth through the speakers because I couldn't get it to come in through both headphones until I realized that When you go in, you hit the microphone button or the input button on the OP-1 field, and it takes you into the selection of radio, microphone, USB input, like all that shit. The microphone on there turns into a line in, and then underneath that, it usually, for me, it's a stereo, and you can just twist the yellow knob and turn that to mono, and then everything comes in on both ears. What's different about the field than the original is the stereo chain. The whole thing is fucking stereo. It's amazing, it's brilliant, and it sounds beautiful, but how do you take advantage of it? With the microphone. On the tape, you have the input indicator. It's the red line with the dot on it, and that goes up and down as you twist the red knob. But if you hit shift and twist that red knob, that ball goes left and right. So you can actually record to the left or record to the right. And what that enables me to do is I record my main line, my main guitar, at the volume that I like, that sits well with everything else and plays well with everything else, and I fucking build that stereo bad bitch. I have this philosophy of things being felt more than heard. I like that idea. That just makes me more comfortable. It also allows for fuck-ups to not be so in your face when they happen. One of the 2 editing features that you get on this thing is that you can lift and drop. I go in with the main melody and I immediately lift it and drop it and copy it, so I don't have to do that again. Then I go splitting and overdubbing. I try to overdub as much as I possibly can. That's the only way you can save track space. You only get 4 tracks and there's 0 editing capabilities. So it's really about intuitively placing things and organizing yourself so that you don't run out of space. I try to keep my guitars and my bass on one track, my vocals on another track, the drums and percussion and rhythm on a 3rd track, and then the 4th track is typically bells and whistles. Things that I feel like don't have anything to do with anything else. Synthesizer stuff, synth beds, drones, sequencers, the arpeggiator, that kind of stuff goes on a 4th track. I never mix 3 tracks down to a 4th track. It's never worked for me. As a matter of fact, I just recently got a comment on one of my videos. They were talking about, how do you do that without losing signal? Every time I do that, it comes out quieter. The quality of the sound is sort of distorted, and I can't find the sweet spot because there are no numbers on that input meter. There are no values there. Once you change that thing and go to something else and you want to come back and add a little bit to the guitar, you're fucked, dude. Especially if you're overdubbing and there's no undo button. Don't get me started. Please, for the love of God, Teenage Engineering, put an undo button on this thing, but also don't. How many times have I destroyed 3 hours of work on that thing only to rebuild it into something I would have never imagined? Yeah, I don't think they're ever gonna put an undo button in there, to be honest with you. The last thing that I wanna mention is the tape tricks, the programming of button 7 and 8, or M1 and M2. Those are programmable. And I knew they were programmable, but what I didn't realize was that every single time I opened a new track, number 8 would always be a high pass filter. And then I would go to the effect, the master effect, and it would be a reverb. And I would think, why, dude, where is that? How do I change that? I can't change that. Until one day I actually tried to program it and I lost the high pass filter, and then I really freaked out because I love the high pass filter aspect of this. A lot of the things that I record into the microphone they have heaviness, they have a real bottom end to them. Low frequencies just creep in. And a lot of the time it's a choice between whether I want reverb or I want a high pass filter. That also has to do with mic placement. While you're moving that thing around, you gotta keep considering these things, these 3rd dimensional aspects to recording. You only get the limitations of 2 effects. So, what was I fucking talking about? I found where the high pass filter's coming from, and it's coming from the EQ, number 2 on the master buttons under the LCD screen. The point I'm trying to make here is, that's where the high pass filter is. So if you need it, program it in. And that's a 3rd effect. I didn't realize that. You actually have 3. Back to the lecture at hand. So to wrap things up, writing and recording on this thing is a special form of self-inflicted torture. That's really what it is. There's nothing easy about it. I have felt though that the more that I do it, the more I get into a rhythm with this thing and it becomes a little bit easier. And the more I discover about the versatility of this thing, which is so crazy, and I'll try to come up with a list of things that I've discovered over the time of using it, things that I've accidentally stumbled on. I'll discuss that in another video. But if you like this video, along with the other sort of music videos that I really like to make, this talking head bullshit it's not easy, dude. It's not easy at all. There are ways that you can make sure you don't miss anything coming down the pipe, so do those things. We haven't even started discussing the editing, which is, that video is gonna be a nightmare and probably like 30 seconds long. But I'll think about it and I'll try to put something entertaining together. I don't know, this might be just the most boring thing. Thanks for watching, and this was weird. All right, later dudes.